We never know where life will lead us or what may hinder us along the way. But while every day can feel like one big question mark, it doesn't have to. With the right insights, strategies, and solutions from Western and Southern Financial Group, together we can look ahead to leave the unknown behind.
What's Pro Football Focus doing? Last week they had Brady. This week they got Brady.
We're literally doing it differently from everybody else.
As a matter of fact, moving forward from this point on, I will not make reference to PFF.
Do you not understand that they are that way because you're Joe Flacco?
And you just like to discredit things that people deserve credit for.
That you can't possibly be expected to defend that.
Talk about the game, Sam.
So,
who cares about what people think about us?
Yeah, I like football season, and all the things that go with it.
Welcome into the PFF NFL podcast. Steve Palazzolo here with Sam Monson. It's championship week, and we're going to get into all the action, and we're going to, of course, look forward to free agency and the key players around the league that teams just can't afford to let hit the open market. We're going to get all into it, but first, don't forget, all first-time depositors at Monkey Knife Fight to put at least $20 into their account while using the promo code PFF will receive a free PFF Edge annual subscription. It's $40 of value for just $20, and you get the opportunity to turn that $20 into even more money playing daily fantasy and prop games at one of the fastest-growing fantasy sports sites in the U.S. It's Monkey Knife Fight. So go to Monkey Knife Fight, deposit your $20, use the promo code PFF, and then you receive a free PFF Edge annual subscription. That's a no-brainer. Draft guide coming out very soon. Also, PFF Elite. When you subscribe using the promo code ACTION, you receive a year of Elite subscription access and 1 year, that's 365 days, Sam, of Action Pro's subscription access for just the $199.99. Action Pro is Action Network's premium subscription offering tailor-made to make avid and new bettors even better. This is a limited time offer that is currently only made available now through the Super Bowl. This offer only applies to first-time Elite annual subscribers. All right, Sam, playoffs, moving on. It's championship week. We'll dive into the two games, and then we'll use ESPN's article, the most important players, that just the biggest upcoming decision for all 32 teams. We'll hit on some of the biggest ones in the second half of the show. Let's start with the NFC Championship, 3 p.m. Eastern. It's going to be snowy and cold, according to the forecast. Packers hosting the Bucs. What are you looking for in this one? We'll dive in deep in the rematch.
Yeah, first NFC Championship game that Aaron Rodgers has ever hosted.
That is crazy.
Right?
Right, yeah.
Been to a few of them. First one he's actually hosted. And the snow, the cold, Green Bay, actual potential home field advantage in this year of no home field advantage. You know, it's effectively eradicated this season over between COVID and no fans in the stands and everything else. This might actually be a legitimate one. There'll be presumably some fans there. There'll be cold, there'll be snow. This is an actual potential home field advantage, especially for or against a team like Tampa Bay. You know, warm weather, Tom Brady doesn't like the cold. Now he's going to go back there and experience it again. Yeah.
Is he a Florida man? Look, we basically live in the South now. We're in Cincinnati, but we're like right on the border with Kentucky. And it gets pretty hot here. And when it's become 30 degrees out there in the last few weeks, like I'm from New England. Normally 30 degrees shouldn't be a big issue for me, but it kind of feels a lot colder. It feels like it's 10 degrees out there. So my body is acclimated to this northern Kentucky weather here, Sam. I wonder how much that's happened with Brady, who's going to probably be rocking his scuba suit. That's what he wears, when it's really cold. Throws the scuba suit on there.
Yeah.
Is he going to be giving advice to the warm weather folks?
Everyone scuba up.
Like Devin White. Devin White played at LSU. Now he's a Buck. He's not ready for the 20-degree weather, is he?
So the way quarterbacks buy their offensive linemen like scooters and stuff, Brady's just going to buy everyone a scuba suit.
Scuba suit.
Scuba suits for everybody for the NFC Championship game.
With a TB12 label on it.
What's your size?
Anyway, I'm looking forward to this game. I think the big question, Aaron Rodgers answered it this week. How much does the first matchup matter? 38-10. And it wasn't just 38-10. It was 10-0 Packers. Yeah. And then the Bucs went on a 38-0 run, of course. do that math. And everything just looked different, right? Aaron Rodgers, I don't want to say imploded, but he just looked rattled, right? He just doesn't get rattled that often. So I can't expect that to happen again. But Rodgers said this week on the Pat McAfee show, how much does that matter? About as much as it matters that the Saints crushed the Bucs at their place, halfway through the season. So my question for you, does that previous game matter at all as we head into the championship game?
It matters to the extent that we've seen that happen between these two teams before. There is, in the spectrum of possible outcomes of what could happen, we at least know that that's on the table, right? There is a scenario by which Aaron Rodgers does implode, throws a bunch of turnover-worthy plays, gets into it with Ndamukong Suh, kind of loses himself, can't deal with the blitz, and the whole thing goes away from Green Bay. We know that that's an option. But because it's happened once before, it's probably not going to happen again. Even at the time, that game was so weird in terms of the 10-0 and then swing all the way the other way. It felt like at the time, this is a game where everything is just going the wrong way for Green Bay. And that those games, when they happen, there's basically nothing you can do, nothing you can do at the time, but also like you can't really take anything from them. Like they don't happen every time. They're just weird confluences of events that all happen at the same time, and you kind of throw them out. And it felt at the time, all right, that was a weird game. It was bad. It looked awful for Green Bay, but you probably have to throw that out in terms of what they're doing this season. That wasn't them. This was just something that happened that day. The thing, though, that was interesting was that argument he got into with Ndamukong Suh, right?
Yeah.
Because Suh is like that as a player in terms of antagonistic, plays on the edge of dirty. He's had some, and he stepped over that line in the past multiple times. But he got into it with Aaron Rodgers, and usually I think when people start to sort of trash talk with Rodgers, he likes it. It's fun for him, and he plays better and just lights them up, right? Something about the Suh thing, it went the other way, and it got in his head, and he became obsessed with that argument rather than like figuring out where the blitz was coming from and how to defeat it. And it sort of distracted him and caused him issues, and that became the story of that game. Like, Suh's going to be the same guy, right? He's not going away. So if you haven't figured out how to like tune that out and not pay attention to what Suh's doing and essentially ignore him, there is a potential that Suh can get in Rodgers' head again and cause him some issues.
A couple numbers to just sum up what we saw in that Week 6 matchup. Aaron Rodgers, completion percentage of 46%. That was his worst since Week 15 of 2014. And again, that was the year where Rodgers was MVP. He was spectacular. He was almost perfect throughout the season until that one game against Buffalo late in the season. That was also his lowest passer rating, 35.4, lowest passer rating since that 2014 Buffalo game. It was his lowest yards per attempt since Week 10 of 2019. Turnover-worthy plays, he had 3, tied for most of the season. Of course, he had a pick 6, and Rodgers only has like 3 pick 6s in his entire career. Not only does he take care of the ball, but he takes care of the ball and does give the defense opportunities to return it. The story was that the Bucs figured out the Packers, right? They blitzed 50% of the time, highest blitz percentage that the Packers have seen all year. They sacked him 3 times on the blitz. Rodgers only been sacked 1 other time on the blitz. So everything about this game does kind of feel like a one-off, right? Like an anomaly. So do the Bucs go in and say, all right, we gotta roll with the same game plan here? Because usually when you face a Rodgers level quarterback, you can't just go with an expected game plan because they have answers. The Packers have the ability to answer these questions.
But yeah, and the other thing is that even with that game included, Rodgers is really good at the stuff that worked.
Yeah.
So even if you were looking at it and saying, well, last time we did this, generally that is not the game plan to beat Aaron Rodgers. Like, even including that game, Rodgers against the blitz this season is a top 10 quarterback. You take that game out, PFF bingo, Rodgers is the best rated quarterback in the NFL against the blitz, right? He's ahead of Baker Mayfield, ahead of Drew Brees, ahead of Mahomes. He's the best graded quarterback in the NFL this season against the blitz, that game aside. And even if you include that game where he was a train wreck, he's still a top 10 graded quarterback against the blitz. So, like, if you were coming into this week without the knowledge of what happened the last time, you would say, well, dialing up the blitz is not the way to attack Aaron Rodgers. Clearly, he carves it up. He's too dangerous to do that. But you now have the evidence of saying that, well, if we blitzed him 50% of the time, it did work. I think a part of it was they were dialing up the blitz in a very specific way a lot of the time. They were kind of attacking the motion that Green Bay had and blitzing off that. And again, this is week 6, right? And week 6 of, I don't want to say it's a new offense because obviously Matt LaFleur was there last year, but it's all the things they're doing this year in terms of pre-snap motion and a lot of those sort of bunch formations and all the things we talked about previously in terms of free, easy, schematic wins to help receivers out, right? Like the Jalen Ramsey play. So instead of just being one-on-one, Devontae Adams against Jalen Ramsey, you put Adams in motion, you scheme him up, you get him free, right? You buy him an easy play that he doesn't have to win one-on-one. Same with Aaron Rodgers. All of those things are kind of new this year. They weren't doing a lot of them last year. So the first time they met, it was 6 weeks into doing this. Now, obviously, they're, 18 weeks into doing this. They should have better answers even if a team decides to attack them the same way and essentially blitz off that motion the way they did in week 6.
Yeah, and the answer is, I think, Devontae Adams, the guy that has a passer rating of 140 in single coverage, 5.3 yards per route in single coverage. The Bucs game plan last week was, all right, Drew Brees torched us against zone the first time around. So it's funny because the Bucs are going from a game planning against the team that kind of had their number, and they had to make adjustments, right? So they're like, we can't do the same thing we did in week 9 against the Saints. We have to completely change. We got to play more press man. We have to get up there and be more aggressive defensively. They're in a spot now. It's kind of like the end of the game where do you stay aggressive or do you play soft coverage when you're in control of the game where it feels like you've had success already? The Bucs have to figure out, do we roll with the same game plan defensively? And if we do, knowing they've prepped for this, or how much are we going to mix it up? How much are we going to play softer zone? And what is the answer going to be for the Bucs covering Devontae Adams? With Jamel Dean and Carlton Davis on the outside, guys who have battled injuries this year, Sean Murphy-Bunting, what do they do to slow down Devontae Adams? Because even though the Packers do have other options with Alan Lazard and Bob Tunyon and all that, it's still going to come down to big game. Rodgers is going to his guy, Devontae Adams, who's been just so dominant this entire season.
Yeah, the Tampa Bay defensive game plan, particularly in the secondary, is an interesting conundrum because we've said for a while that I think that group of defensive backs is best when you let them get physical and aggressive at the line of scrimmage and play more man coverage. But you now have to do that against Devontae Adams.
Right.
And if you miss like one missed jam at the line, he's 5 yards open. It's a slant that's going to the house. Like, he is extremely dangerous against that kind of stuff. It's probably the last thing you want to do against him specifically, but it is probably what they do best. The other thing is, like, Tampa Bay has now looked really good for a period of time, but let's not forget just how important the sort of the game flow of last week was in that how that game panned out, right? The turnovers from the Saints essentially gave the ball to the Bucs, right? They put them in good field position time after time after time, let them build this lead, and then they're in business. But like if that doesn't happen this week, if the Packers, instead of turning the ball over and giving them free plays and free scores, if they actually get out to their own hot start and put up the same double-digit point lead that they had the first time around, like that's a much more challenging place for this Bucs team to be, chasing a game, having to execute well on offense, needing Tom Brady to have a clean game, not a 3 turnover-worthy play game like last week. Like, Green Bay, I think, can put the Bucs under a lot of pressure quickly in a way the Saints weren't able to do.
Yeah, look, I think both sides it's going to be fantastic. I think staying on the Bucs defensive side, I think the linebackers were active. Devin White, Levante David. Even though it's funny because linebackers are one of those positions where, like, I think you only remember the great plays, and Devin White's made a ton of them this year. He's also been out of position for a lot. He's been attacked in coverage at times. Those guys fly around the field. I think they're going to be key against the backs out of the backfield, because the Packers like to throw to Aaron Jones. They like to throw to their backs, and whatever the Packers try to do from a run game perspective. That's the other component here. Todd Bowles' Bucs defenses have been excellent against the run, for whatever that's worth. And the last time the Packers played in the snow, what did they do? They unleashed A.J. Dillon. It was
Snowback.
A.J. Dillon time in the snow. And Aaron Rodgers played a great game against the Titans.
Is it too late to nickname him the Snowplow? Can we get that started?
I think he earns it if he rushes for 100 this weekend.
Okay.
So that'll be interesting as well too, because we always talk about, look, it's balance on offense is just, attacking what the defense is giving you, right? The Bucs defense stops the run extremely well. I think the Packers would make a mistake if they're like, well, it's snow time, bring out A.J. Dillon, run, pass. I think that would be a mistake, even though it worked against the Titans pretty well on that Sunday night game in the snow. But just keep an eye on that, because the Bucs, that's strength against strength if they do try to attack from a run game perspective.
Particularly if Vita Vea returning is anything like the Vita Vea that got injured before he went down. Like, he was playing like at an all-pro level for the first 5 weeks of the season before he broke his ankle.
He got hurt in the Packers game.
Yeah, so 5
he was
weeks.
There early. Yeah.
Week 6 he went down, but he was playing at like an all-pro level at the point that he went down. If he's returned at that level, that guy in the middle immediately shores up an awful lot on what was already a good defensive front.
Vita Vea was fantastic before going down to injury. He had a 90.1 grade, only played 224 snaps so far this season, but maybe it was a hurt just before the Packers game. He's only played in 5 games. Did he play? No, he got hurt before the Packers game. So they did that without him. But yeah, he's great against the run, and he can push the pocket just a little bit, right? So he's supposed to come off injured reserve. I don't know if you're expecting him for 50 snaps a game, but even if it's a good 20 to 30 snaps that he can contribute here, that's extremely valuable as well. So,
yeah.
So what else are you expecting here, Packers offense-wise? I mean, let's talk Rodgers. We've talked a little bit about the legacy stuff and all that. It's his first time hosting an NFC Championship game. He has only been to one Super Bowl. Hasn't been to a Super Bowl since the 2010 season. It just feels like, with all that's happened, he is just in the zone this year. I'm expecting him to come out and play well, right?
Yeah. I mean, Rodgers he's essentially been pretty phenomenal all season long outside of that Bucs game. Like, Deshaun Watson hasn't had a bad game, didn't have a bad game all season long. Went the full 16 regular season games without a stinker in there. Aaron Rodgers had the stinker, but it was one. And he had that one game that was just a nightmare. It happened to be against this team that he's repeating against, but outside of that, his baseline was the highest of any quarterback in the league. So I don't see any reason that would repeat. I mean, we said it felt at the time like a kind of freak game where everything was going south. I don't think it's going to happen the same way, at which point you have to like A, Green Bay, and B, Aaron Rodgers' ability to do the same thing against this defense that he's done against every other defense.
Now let's go to the other side of the ball. Bucs, Brady, passing offense, again, are going to be key. My question is, game plan wise, we talked about this on Monday's show, they ran the ball like crazy on early downs. And even though Leonard Fournette looks a tick better than he has in the past from a vision and quickness standpoint, I don't think Leonard Fournette and Ronald Jones are winning this game for the Bucs. So I thought that last week there might be an issue with, okay, it's Bruce Arians' coaching history versus Sean Payton's coaching history. Bruce Arians is the type of guy, emotional game. He's going to, throw the red flag at a time he's not supposed to, just off emotion. He might see the snowflakes and, decide we definitely can't throw the ball here. Like, that's what I wanted. Like, do they completely, take the ball out of Brady's hands, which essentially they did. And did they do that last week because they hadn't had success throwing the ball against a really good Saints secondary? Or is it just the playoff strategy of the Bucs when they, start to get further into the closer to the Super Bowl?
I think it's just what Bruce Arians does. Like, that's just his offense, right?
But it seemed like they had done a better job after the bye and down the stretch, throwing the ball on early downs, running more play action, running more stuff that Brady was comfortable with.
Yeah, but here's the other thing. Is that while it's generally a bad thing for an offense to do to run the ball in 1st and 10 because runs are just less efficient and you typically are putting your quarterback in a tougher spot on 2nd and more importantly 3rd down. But the Bucs have like the highest average depth of target in the NFL. Their offense is built to pick up 10 to 15 yards in a chunk That's what they're targeting, essentially every pass attempt anyway. So whereas there are other offenses out there where when they're facing 3rd and 12, it's like a catastrophe. They almost don't have a play in there to pick up 3rd and 12. Like everything the Bucs do is designed to pick up 3rd and 12 anyway. So I think they're actually unusually well suited to do what it is they're doing in terms of hamstringing themselves on 3rd down. Now, where it becomes interesting is, like, if it is bad weather and the snow actually affects the passing game, it also probably disproportionately affects the Tampa Bay passing game more than any other one, because they do have one of the highest average depths of target in the NFL. They're top? Yeah. Only Jalen Hurts has a higher average depth of target for the entirety of the season.
Yeah, I think Drew Lock was in the mix. I mean, it's
right,
Brady and a couple other guys with smaller samples. Yep.
Yeah, Brady's number one minus Jalen Hurts. So they have like the highest average depth of target in the NFL. So the ball is traveling further in the air longer than any other quarterback in the league. If it's tough to throw because the weather's bad, like, it hurts them more than it hurts other teams. So suddenly now they're reduced to like running the ball a lot and trying to warp the offense to a more, I guess, Brady-centric short area, higher percentage play. And if you're trying to do that on the fly in the NFC Championship game, it feels like a tricky thing to execute.
Well, and last week that's what felt like was missing. The Bucs didn't have any rhythm offensively early on. They had a 3rd and 3 where they throw it down the field, a 3rd and 1 where they throw it down the field, and it's like, guys, let Brady, on 3rd and 3, let him throw a quick out, let him throw a 3-yard out, and it's not like you don't have the receivers to get open in that area. You've got Chris Godwin, and when Antonio Brown is healthy, he can certainly do that too. Plus, you get the tight ends. By the way, Cameron Brate's been like the most effective receiver out of all these guys, and I think that's what makes the Bucs so dangerous offensively. All these guys that they have to throw to. Antonio Brown's dealing with a knee injury, but even if he's out, we had Tyler Johnson come in making a great play on the back shoulder. I think they should be using Scotty Miller even more. They didn't unleash Scotty Miller until late in the game, and before you know it, he's always in the mix making a big play. 31-yarder that flipped the field for the Bucs. So they have answers everywhere. Mike Evans did get shut down by Jair Alexander the same way he got shut down by Marshawn Lattimore essentially this entire season. So that'll be interesting as well, because he's been a key to the offensive resurgence down in the second half of the season as well.
I love it when the data says what you want it to say and backs up the point you're trying to make.
What'd you find?
On 3rd and 11 plus, so 3rd and long for the entirety of the season, including the playoffs, Tom Brady has the second highest yards per attempt figure. Only Matthew Stafford has a better yards per attempt figure than Tom Brady. He has completed 22 of 29 pass attempts on 3rd and long. So essentially, all that running that the Bucs do on 1st down for any other team,
that's unsustainable, man.
Of course it's unsustainable.
That's the problem.
But my point is, in this offense, this is what they're designed to do. The way that offense is set up, the things that they do generally, just out of the box as a cookie cutter, here's the play we're running, it's designed to attack that stuff. Like, that is where they live anyway. So when you're putting yourself in a more disadvantageous position in abstract terms, it's not hurting this offense as much as it would hurt, pick a team that's crappy at it, Baltimore.
Yeah, I mean, if you have a better quarterback, yeah, you can get away with 3rd and 8, 3rd and 10, 3rd and 11 more often. But this is the same thing we've criticized Seattle for, for years, which is like, you can't just go run, pass, Russ, bail us out on 3rd down. It runs out at some point. Brady's not going to bail you out of 3rd down every single time.
But for example, Russell Wilson has a grade of 44 and a yards per attempt figure like half as much.
Yeah, because they... it regressed at some point after years of being great.
But also, that passing attack isn't designed like that. Like, that passing attack is not consistently there to just target 15 yards downfield. They don't have the same hyper-aggressive, deep... Like, this is Bruce Arians' scheme, right? This is what everybody talks about. It's the highest average depth of target in the league. They go deep downfield. That's why everybody has 40 turnover-worthy plays in year one, because you're just flinging the ball into deep coverage.
Yeah.
But the point is, if you're good at that, and Brady, 40 turnover-worthy plays for everybody else in year one, 12 for Brady. So Brady is good at that. If you're good at that, you're not hurt as much as other teams when you're running the ball into a brick wall and facing 3rd and 10.
So the first time these guys played, the Bucs offense wasn't on the field very much at all. I mean, it was really the Packers controlled the clock, so to speak, but there was the pick six. There was some short fields that the Bucs took advantage of. Brady did throw the ball pretty efficiently, but they didn't need him a ton. The other factor here, as much as we like to diminish the run game. The Packers are one of those teams, as we say. We'll talk about the Bills-Chiefs game. The Packers like to invite the run. They're encouraging you to run the ball, which is what the Saints did last week. So are the Packers going to invite the Bucs to run the ball again? Probably. Will the Bucs take the bait? I expect it to. And if you're going to run the ball, Fournette and Ronald Jones, I think you have to at least average 4.5, 5 yards per carry to be efficient and make things a little bit easier. At the same time, Brady is also one of the more efficient quarterbacks against light boxes, against 6 guys in the box. He's averaging 7 yards per attempt, which is better than you normally would running the ball. So I think the Bucs have to dictate things offensively and find that balance.
The one other thing that I think has a shot to be an issue in this game, or a significant factor that we should talk about, is earlier in the season, the Bucs lost Ali Marpet at left guard, and the replacement was a catastrophe, right? Joe Haig allowed 7 total pressures in the first start, which was the same amount as Marpet had allowed in like 7 weeks before that. And that switch alone was bad enough to essentially ruin the game, that game. And then after that game, it was like, well, we can't start Joe Haig anymore. We're going to make shuffles on the offensive line. Jensen's going to go out to guard. Shipley, was that who came in at center? And we're going to...
Before he retired.
Right.
Yeah.
We're going to move things around and make 2 positions worse, right? So basically losing Marpet honestly was responsible for a lot of their like mid-season issues. Marpet's back, but they lost right guard Alex Kappa, and Aaron Stinney was the guy that came in and played 72 snaps. Played okay, but does that happen 2 weeks in a row? Like, can he still play okay the second time of asking, or does the fact that he's Aaron Stinney and therefore a weak link probably come back to bite them at this point? And if it does, like, can it be like Kenny Clark he suddenly has to deal with, right? Or Zadarius Smith moving inside on passing downs? This is a tall ask for a guy who, doesn't exactly have a ton of pedigree. It's 2018 undrafted free agent. Can he hold up, or does he have a Joe Haig potential to derail this thing all by himself?
116 career snaps for Stinney, 70 of which came last week against New Orleans.
Yes.
And, he gave up a few pressures, had a penalty in there. So expectations aren't extremely high for Stinney. And, I think those matchups could be difficult. The other matchup to keep an eye on, Rashawn Gary, the guy, remember Draft Time, podcast meme guy. I got to go back to our draft takes. We said, look, he's probably not a first-round caliber player based off production, but he certainly is based off of tools. Rashawn Gary, since week 16, got to do this small sample size stuff. Since week 16, since the snow game against Tennessee, the highest-graded edge defender in the NFL. That's Rashawn Gary right now. It's a 3-game sample size. But given his history of freak 280-pound athlete who has everything you're looking for from an athleticism standpoint, who never really put it together from a production standpoint, outside of a few plays. He had some splash plays at Michigan. Below average grading for the first, 80% of his career, year plus. Last 3 weeks, he's been awesome. So I think with a guy like that, do you say, is this did he flip a switch and tap into his potential, or is it just a random 3-game run? But keep an eye on Rashawn Gary. And then Tristan Wirfs, the right tackle. He's been the best pass blocking offensive tackle among rookies, one of the better rookies, in the NFL. And that's been huge. Like going back to Draft Time again, the Bucs drafted for need, the thing we hate, right?
Yeah.
They said, we need help at safety and we need a starting right tackle. But they got value players there. Tristan Wirfs at tackle, Antoine Winfield second round at safety. Both players have been instrumental in their success this year. So I think from a draft standpoint, the Bucs nailed it with Wirfs, nailed it with Winfield, and it did fit with what they needed to do in the short term as well.
Yeah, it's always fun when a team does draft for need and actually gets it right. We desperately need to plug this one specific hole with this player in the first round, and then they nail it. And it, part of it is, that's great. That fixes a lot of things. And then the other side of that is it potentially reinforces some really bad behavior. It's kind of like it's like training a puppy, Steve, that I'm dealing with right now. You don't want to reward it at the wrong time, because then you reinforce the bad behavior. Yeah. So you don't want to reward bad process by hitting a Tristan Wirfs pick out of the park, because then all of a sudden you're going to do that every year, right? We're just rolling the draft for one massive glaring hole we need to plug in the first round and rely on our ability to do that every time. It's not good.
I love that you've evolved from rugby analogies to puppy analogies.
Puppy
Yeah,
analogies.
that's good.
It's all about whatever's in your head at the time.
It just shows where you are in life right now.
Buried under a mound of hell.
The off-air conversations that we have comparing your puppy training to my child training, it's
Child training.
great. That's what it is, right? We're training children.
Yeah, I just think I'm not sure it's as...
It's called racing them,
right.
usually.
I'm not sure it's as acceptable a term to use.
The reality is training them.
For your kids.
You're training them how to be humans.
Everyone accepts that, you train a puppy. I'm not sure people accept the term training for kids.
All right, the one last thing I want to mention about this game, the Packers secondary. And I think I mentioned it last week with the Rams. If you're going to attack someone, it's Kevin King, 55.3 regular season grade. He struggles in their zone concepts. I think, the good route runners can handle him pretty well. I'd be interested if the Packers try to match him up with Mike Evans a little bit more. Evans is more of a vertical threat, and King can handle vertical threats a little bit better. But if you get Chris Godwin, Antonio Brown, if he plays, or any of the other Bucs receivers on Kevin King, I think it's an advantage. And then you could pair him to Jair Alexander on the other side, one of the better corners in the entire NFL. And then the one last thing, the Packers doing a great job in that intermediate middle of the field with Darnell Savage, with Adrian Amos, a place that Brady loves to attack. The Packers are going to force those outside the numbers types of throws. I really think the Bucs offense is going to come down to the same thing all year. Brady needs to make 4 or 5 big-time throws in this one.
Well, yeah, he does, and he always does. The critical thing, I think, for them is the other side of that ledger. It's he needs to not make the bad throw.
Yeah.
Right? That, I think, is the real key. He matched Drew Brees for turnover-worthy plays last week.
One was
right?
the dropped fumble, which wasn't really.
Sure, but matched Drew Brees for putting the ball in harm's way, but had the benefit of his team making the takeaways and putting him in favorable positions. Plus, he actually offset them with some big throws that Drew Brees didn't, right? Brees had nothing. Brady can't have that kind of game against Green Bay. The Packers are too good. If he has 3 turnover-worthy plays again, the Bucs don't win the game. They unless he has some absurd volume of big plays. These two teams, though, overall, in terms of our data, are really evenly matched. Overall PFF ELO rankings, it's number 3 versus number 4. Offense, it's number 1 versus number 2. Defense, it's number 2 versus number 5. They come down really
Bucs
similarly.
Number 2, by the way.
Yes.
And Packers 5.
But remember, Green Bay's defense has been playing better recently.
Right.
So it's Bucs have a slight edge there, but the Packers, in terms of recency bias, are a lot closer than that. So these, the data says this is pretty razor thin.
So it's Bucs. Packers by 3 is where the market is right now. We have a slight edge for the Packers here. I don't know how much the weather is going to be. Let's wrap it up with this before we make picks. You talked about Brady's legacy and the whole thing. We talked Rodgers' legacy. You mentioned Brady's legacy. This puts him into like Michael Jordan plus type of territory, right? If he can not just get to the Super Bowl, but of course win one. What are you expecting from Brady just from a performance standpoint this weekend?
I think we'll probably get good Tom Brady. I think everyone came out of last week saying that it looked like 2 40-plus-year-old quarterbacks slugging it out.
Absolutely
and I don't think it did. I think Brady had a bad game, which hadn't happened for a while, right? The turnover-worthy plays. Brady hadn't done that for a long time. So when it shows up, this season generally, Brady has timed his ugly performances for bad times in terms of all the eyes on him, prime time, right?
Yep.
He's had his worst games when the lights are on him, which, if you're a narrative guy, you'd be like, well, this is Kirk Cousins, can't play on the big time. But it's Tom Brady. That's probably not true based off his previous career history, right? At which point you probably just have to say he's been unlucky to have his worst games when everybody is watching. But my point is there's now a significant chunk of people that think that Brady is just a lot worse than he actually is because he's had bad games when everybody's watching.
Top 2 graded quarterbacks, Aaron Rodgers number 1, Brady number 2. They've played each other 2 other times in their history. That's it. Well, 3 other times, including this year. So it's 2014 Patriots-Packers, 2018 Patriots-Packers, and then the matchup earlier this year.
This is the Super Bowl that you've been wanting for like 15 years.
I picked Patriots-Packers Super Bowl for at least 10 straight years.
Yes.
And was never right.
You're not getting it.
This
but
is
you
it.
might get
You're
getting it in the NFC Championship.
I was really picking Brady Rodgers, right? But the 2014 game is the game I'm kind of expecting. And what happened there was Rodgers was pristine. Brady was excellent, but like just a slightly worse. And I'm not saying that's exactly I just think both quarterbacks are going to play well. I think it's going to be one of those legendary types of matchups in the snow. It's going to be memorable. I'm leaning Packers here to win. I think they're the better all-around team, and I think they're going to bounce back from that demoralizing 38-10 loss. Where are you going?
Yeah, the more I talk it out, the more I think Green Bay are the team to be picking. I think they're just it's a cleaner team, and I know that last game happened, and it happened. You know, it was a huge win for Tampa Bay, but as I say, at the time it felt weird. Once you have that on tape for both teams to go back and analyze what went wrong, it feels very unlikely that the same thing is going to happen for Green Bay, at which point I just don't know that Tampa Bay are able to match them.
One last thing, we had a YouTube commenter say you've been talking about the Bucs having answers a lot, and he didn't know what you meant specifically by that. What did you mean by that? Down the stretch, the Bucs have more answers now than they did earlier in the season.
One of their biggest issues earlier in the year was when teams were able to pressure them or cause problems with their protections by the blitz. So either winning one-on-one matchups with the offensive linemen or causing breakdowns in the protection packages that they had, regardless of how many people were into block. The Bucs, because of that Bruce Arians offense and deep down the field and Tom Brady being new to it, they didn't know where to go with the ball, right? So when Brady got pressured, it was a problem because all he had was either chuck it up deep and hope it comes down, which is usually not something he's going to do, or try and dump it off to a running back in the flat who's going to get buried. There's nowhere to go. They didn't have a good system of hot routes or hot reads. They didn't have sensible places to go with the football. So when pressure came, it was a much bigger problem. Since that point, they have started to develop answers. They've also gotten better with their protections. Like they understand better. Brady understands better how to call the protections in this offense to actually neutralize some of these blitzes. But now they've actually started to develop hot reads, right? Mike Evans, the Godwin, they receivers have patterns specifically designed for Brady to have an outlet that isn't a check down to a running back or a prayer deep down the field. They have the parts of the offense has modified towards figuring out that flaw that they had earlier in the season.
So much on the line in this one, Packers-Bucs. That's the first game on Sunday, and then the second one, the AFC Championship. The Buffalo Bills, they're back at the Kansas City Chiefs. The big story, of course, is going to be Patrick Mahomes. It sounds like he's going to be fine. So we're just going to go.
Well, it sounds like he'll play.
He'll play. That's fine for me.
Well, no, because you see, there was the concussion / stinger / nerve, whatever. That is probably going to be fine. But he also injured his toe, remember? Like before that point, he had dinged his toe up and was kind of limping around the place anyway. So I don't know if that is going to be 100%. And remember...
And that's fine. He did start missing throws left and right after that.
And remember last year when he was injured with, an ankle and then hurt his ribs? Like Mahomes for a period last season was not playing well and then got healthy and went back to being Patrick Mahomes. So if Mahomes now, this week, is hobbled with turf toe, like that's a pretty significant injury for a quarterback who likes to move around and run around and scramble and not just that, but, throw off your foot. Like your toe is kind of important in terms of just general biomechanics for throwing a football. You might know this, Steve, as a guy that used to throw things for a living.
I do.
Yeah. So if
Mahomes, your whole body, it's full body exercise.
There you go. Yeah. So if Mahomes does have an injured toe, that's significant.
It is. The point I was trying to make is he's going to play. The head injury should be cleared.
Yes.
Now the question is, okay, will the toe injury hurt him from a throwing standpoint? Maybe a little bit. I think you have time to, tape it up and he'll be fine. He'll be fine. The first matchup though was interesting, right? I mean, Allen had one of his worst games of the year. Mahomes was missing a bunch of throws early on. It was windy. The weather was rough, and the Chiefs ran like crazy, over on the Bills. And we've used this narrative all year that the Bills, they like to do that. They're inviting you to run. They want you to run the ball against them. They're also not good at stopping the run, right? They're the second worst run defense grade in the entire NFL. Will the Chiefs take the bait here? This is one of the big storylines we talk about in all of these big games, Sam. It seems like the smartest teams are saying, come on, please take the ball out of your quarterback's hands. And it's even more crucial this weekend as 4 of the top 5 graded PFF quarterbacks are still playing, including Allen and Mahomes here.
Yeah, I do wonder, though, if the Mahomes injury changes that game plan a little bit, because I would generally agree that I think the general perception of the first game plan that Buffalo had is not the same as the sort of PFF interpretation of it, right? Generally, I think our interpretation of it was that's a smart thing to do, right? This is the best offense in the NFL. You're probably not going to stop them, so let's invite them to do the thing that's least efficient. And they'll take it, apparently. Like, if you say, we're going to give you a light box all day long, 6 guys, you should run the ball because you have a favorable matchup. They apparently are all too happy to do that and rack up, a couple of 100 yards on the ground. But while you're doing that, you're not picking up 10 yards per pass attempt and carving you up through the air. So you're essentially you're inviting them, and they're accepting the invitation to make themselves less efficient on offense. So I think generally we would look at that and say, that's not a bad thing to be doing. And yeah, let's do it again. You didn't win the game last time, but it was because, as you said, Josh Allen didn't have a particularly good game. If Josh Allen has his usual excellent game and you do that again to the Chiefs offense, you probably do win the second time of asking.
So the point of this strategy, though, so the first matchup, right? Clyde Edwards-Helaire against 6 or fewer defenders in the box, right? And just for perspective here for people, the average box defenders is about 7, right? You have 7 guys in the box. And the old school way of playing football is, okay, you bring the 8th guy down, and for the most part, most formations, you've got every gap covered, plus you have an unblocked defender to take on the running back. And that's how you stop the run historically. So when you have 6 or fewer defenders in the box, at best, the offense is going to have, at worst, they're going to have the 5 offensive linemen. They generally have a tight end or whatever, and it's even, and it's to the offense's advantage. That is the time when it's actually more effective to run the ball. Now, the key to this strategy, though, is to not give up 8.1 yards per carry as they did the first time, the Bills.
Yeah.
Edwards-Helaire had 13 carries for 105 yards. That's 8.1 against 6 or fewer defenders in the box. So the strategy was fine. And the goal would be to hold them to 5 yards per carry, not 8. Hold them to about 5 yards per carry for just, simplistic terms. And that just takes the ball out of Mahomes' hands one extra time, which means that's one fewer huge play that Tyreek Hill or Travis Kelce can make. That's the strategy. So I think the Bills didn't execute it perfectly because they gave up probably still more than you would like. But I use the same term I used last week, the race for 30. When you're playing the Chiefs, you have to try to get to 30 as much as possible. And I think your goal should be to keep that offense under 30. And the more they hand the ball off, the more that's likely.
So last time, Kansas City had 39 rush attempts against Buffalo. Do you know how many times they faced 8 guys in the box?
3, 4? Probably
0.
Not even. I figured it'd be like goal line runs or something.
Not once. They didn't have a single play where they had 8 guys in the box. You know how many times they had 6 or fewer guys in the box?
15 or 20.
15.
Yeah.
So 15 attempts with a really light box and not one with a heavy box. It was a genuine concerted effort to do that, right? They completely invited Kansas City to run the ball, and the Chiefs were only too happy to do that. What intrigues me, though, is if Mahomes comes out and on that toe is not the same guy, right? If he's slightly limited, if he's not playing his usual, laser pinpoint accuracy, if he's not comfortable running around and making plays and all those kinds of things, and this was your game plan, let's have light box, drop everyone off into coverage, tell them to run the ball and hand it off and not attack us with the pass. But suddenly, Mahomes looks vulnerable. Do you adjust? Do you go after him? Do you cause him problems? Because remember, the other interesting sort of blueprint throughout this season for causing Mahomes problems was the Raiders, who their front seven almost seemed to play like the entire front seven was a spy, right? So you kind of sit back, you wait till Mahomes does Mahomes things, which is start running out of a clean pocket to make plays, and the second he breaks cover, all 7 guys run after him and converge on him, right? And when they did that, it caused him real issues, because normally when he breaks contain and starts running off into the flat, there's one guy chasing him down, and Mahomes is just buying time until somebody uncovers and he hits him, right? When the entire front seven essentially is acting as a spy, the second he broke contain, there was 4 guys around him and he had to get rid of the ball quickly, and it didn't go particularly well. So if he's hobbled and isn't 100% himself, the Bills have the speed on defense. Tremaine Edmonds, those safeties, they could execute that kind of game plan and put him under real pressure in the situations that he usually murders people in.
Yeah, it's a good call out because I think with Mahomes, so I didn't think I don't think his mobility was affected that much last week.
Well, that was like 5 minutes after injuring it. Like, what is it like a week later?
Well, you tell me, doctor.
I've never injured my toe. I don't know.
Can you call your dad or something and?
Yeah, we'll do that. Yeah,
let's get him. Let's get him live.
Get him live. Yeah,
Dr. Monson, we need to figure out how much Mahomes is going to be hobbled here. So the strategy you're talking about with the Raiders too is just it's knowing the pass rush lanes, like knowing your lanes and kind of knowing. I think the teams that do it best, they have discipline with their pass rush lanes, and then they know where Mahomes is going to try to escape, and that's when they collapse on him, right? And that's when they try to make things a little bit more difficult. So I think the Bills could employ that strategy and be smart. It's also a different Bills team than it has been in previous years, where their pass rush is just much deeper than it used to be. We mentioned this last week too. It used to just be Jerry Hughes. And now Ed Oliver's done a pretty nice job. I mean, they've got
not last week.
Not last week. I'm just saying overall. Yeah. Run defense wise, Oliver's been rough. I gave the scouting report a couple weeks ago. It's been rough. He's been moved at the point of attack. He's not great. But with Oliver, Mario Addison's played well, Quentin Jefferson, all those guys, 30 plus pressures for all of them. They have the guys to maybe put a little bit of pressure, but it's different with Mahomes. You don't want to sell out because it's about pass rush lanes and it's about not letting him escape. But it's a good point. I think his mobility is going to be a key there. I think from a Chiefs standpoint, though, strategically, it might look similar to last week against the Browns. The Bills like to play the too high shell. They like to play, quarters and cover 2 and cover 6 and all the softer zone type of coverages for the most part. And it's going to be the patience. It's going to be Mahomes taking the underneath stuff. Bills don't want to give up the big plays, so it's going to be Kelsey and Hill and whoever else underneath. And Mahomes just has to make throw after throw after throw.
Yeah. I do think this is a really intriguing matchup for that game plan reason. It's interesting that both these games are matchups from earlier encounters in the season.
Yep.
The one with the NFC one we talked about, I don't envisage it playing out the same way almost at all. This one could, though. Obviously, the weather is probably going to be less of a factor this time around, but that is a real game plan, I think, that makes sense against Kansas City. The fact that Mahomes is potentially not 100% adds a complicating factor to that and potentially forces you in a different direction, or at least makes you prepare a contingency game plan, right? So that if you roll out there with the same thing and you see Mahomes visibly struggling compared to what he normally does, you can start dialing up some stuff that you've prepared rather than trying to implement it live in the game. But I think that's a very real way of Buffalo doing exactly the same thing as before, which is, relatively speaking, slow down this Kansas City offense. Then the focus goes on the other side of the ball and Josh Allen.
I was going to add one more matchup on that side of the ball, but good segue.
Okay.
Just wanted to say Jerry Hughes versus Mike Remmers. Remmers is filled in pretty well for our boy Mitchell Schwartz due to injury, but Jerry Hughes playing really, really well. So just keep an eye on that matchup at right tackle. Now to Josh Allen on the other side of the ball. Got to take care of the ball. By the way, he didn't play great against the Ravens last week. 60 PFF grade. So this whole that's why I was kind of laughing at the Brady Breeze. Hey, it's just a bunch old guys just look old and stuff. It's like Brady actually graded better than Josh Allen last week. It's not like Josh Allen isn't old.
No, no, he's not.
He just had a playoff game that wasn't as good as previous games.
Yeah.
That's all. I think Allen's going to have to play a special game here. The challenge with the Chiefs defense, the thing we've been harping on really for the last 2 years with their defensive coordinator Spags, is discouraging passes beyond the line of scrimmage. So I think the Bills also have to play that patient game. And this is a game. This is something that Allen has gotten much better at the last couple of years, taking the underneath stuff and putting together 10 or 12 play drives instead of just trying to hit a home run. So I think it's going to be both. It's going to be both quarterbacks. They're going to drop back 40 plus times or whatever it is. Who's going to make fewer mistakes? Who's going to miss fewer throws? Who's just going to be more efficient? And Allen has shown that he can hang in that arena this year playing that game.
Yeah, and the Chiefs defense was hyper aggressive the last time they played. I guess I would say the weather was probably a part of that. Like, that the passing game is not going to be at its most efficient, so that's when you would dial up crazy pressure and blitz and all those kinds of things. So they blitzed Josh Allen 15 out of 31 dropbacks, half essentially. He was under pressure more than half of his dropbacks. Those are numbers that are like game over. Like, you don't win games when that happens. I don't think that will necessarily happen again. They might come after him again because for some reason, I was trying to work this out. Well, teams blitz Josh Allen a lot still, right? Even though over a pretty decent period of time now, he has been one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL at carving up the blitz. Now, is that a lag factor of teams haven't yet caught up to the idea that he's progressed beyond that now and it's probably not the best thing to do? Or do you look at him and say, all right, like, it's risky, but it's probably still the best thing to do against him? Like, you might cause some issues, particularly less so a bad mistake and an interception. But if you blitz him, that's when you might get him to hold onto the ball and potentially fumble it away in the pocket and those kinds of things. So I can't work out whether the teams haven't figured out yet that he's better than that now, or if they still just think that that's the best way of attacking him and therefore are going to do it, even though he's currently ripping it to shreds.
I think it's the natural tendency of defensive coordinators to assume veteran quarterback, like Brady, Breeze, Rodgers, all those guys don't get Peyton. They didn't get blitzed a lot at all. You'd say, you got to pressure those guys, but don't blitz because you leave a hole, they're going to find it immediately. But usually young quarterbacks you attack.
Yeah, but usually it's only once they've proved that they don't get beaten by it anymore. Like, everybody, as you say, young quarterbacks get blitzed a ton, right? And then at some point, the young quarterback proves that, all right, now he can handle the blitz, and you stop doing it because that's a problem, right? If you blitz and they hit you, it's a bigger play. So at some stage, teams then back off, and then you become the Rodgers, Brady, Breeze, Manning, and it's like, don't blitz those guys. They understand how to beat it. So have we just reached that point now where Josh Allen has crossed that threshold, but teams don't yet believe it? Or do you look at a guy like Allen or like Mahomes or whoever it is and say, whatever you do, you're going to lose. So let's be aggressive and hope we can create a turnover, and that's still the best thing to do.
I think it's the second part. I mean, Mahomes crushes the blitz as much as anybody because of quick decision-making and guys that get open. You beat the blitz by having guys who get open quickly. And to me, that's the bottom line. Both of these teams have guys who get open quickly, right? I mean, they have the Bills, we talked about all year. They've got one of the best receiving cores. We know that the Chiefs have probably the most dangerous receiver plus tight end combination in the NFL. That's how you beat the blitz. Guys who get open quickly. And you have in a scheme that's not making sure, not having everybody run 15 yards down the field every single time. I also think when you attack a Josh Allen, it's for contain purposes as well. You know that a guy, when he breaks the pocket, he's really dangerous. If you do have that extra rusher, it's riskier, but you can at least, play your pass rush lanes, not let him get out of there. I want to see this. I want to see Tyrann Mathieu too. He had the big interception last week. He's just that dude who makes plays all the time, right? In big games. If Allen does make one of those errant throws late over the middle or whatever it is, things that he's done throughout his career, could be Mathieu picking it off. Lining up all over the place, 390 snaps at traditional free safety, about 600 in the box. He'll line up on the line of scrimmage. He lines up all over the place. So just, keep an eye on him.
Yeah. I mean, every one of these games seems to come down to a weird turnover or a play that you can't predict. And those are the things that determine these games. And Tyrann Mathieu is unusually good at creating those. Like, always has been throughout his entire career. Just gets himself around the ball and causes problems.
Since 2019, here's Mathieu. 23 tackles for a loss or no gain. That's fourth. 10 interceptions, most among safeties since early 2019, beginning of 2019. Passer rating of 60 when targeted. That's third best. So it's tough to make a consistent impact at safety because teams can avoid you. But Mathieu, since his LSU days, has always been around the football. So I think that's one to keep an eye on as well. By the way, at a macro level, all four teams here, four of the best offenses in the NFL. Mm-hmm. We are going to spend all offseason telling teams to just stock up on receivers and corners. It's what we do. These teams exemplify that. Other than the Packers stocking up on receivers, but they have the best.
Remember last year there was a big anti-analytics movement because you could look at the playoff teams and be like, oh, all these teams are the best running teams in the NFL. What about the run game doesn't matter, analytics nerds? Yeah. And it was like, people were using that as a stick to beat analytics with. This year, it's like it's the opposite, right? And it probably just shows that, there's a hell of a lot of variance when you get to the playoffs and it's a single knockout tournament. But now it's all the best passing attacks are the teams that are challenging to win the Super Bowl. The 4 out of the 5 best graded quarterbacks are the 4 remaining with a chance to go to and win the Super Bowl. Like, this is the revenge of the analytics year where like everybody wins based off how well you pass the ball and how well you stop the pass, particularly in 2020 when the passing game has never been more powerful because, holding has been eradicated and all those kinds of things.
And when you look at all the passing attacks, the Packers, they have Devontae Adams, and they've had secondary options emerge. The Bucs have as well-rounded of a receiving core as any in the league. The Bills have as well-rounded of a receiving core as any in the league, plus Stephon Diggs, top 3 to 5 receiver this year. And then the Chiefs, as we mentioned, with Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce. I mean, so this whole weekend is about playmakers making plays and finding ways to stop those guys. And I think in this one, the Bills defense has a history of doing a pretty good job here, but not so much this year of slowing down opposing passing attacks. And the Chiefs do a good job of at least avoiding big plays. I think that's where the Chiefs at least have the advantage to at least slow down the Bills' passing attack in this one.
Both these defenses, I think there's similarities between them, though, in that I don't think either of them is great, but I think both of them are clever and good at scheming and good at game planning and taking away the one thing that you want to do and at least forcing you to something else.
Yeah.
And they're good enough to win every now and again, right? Whether it's a key third down, whether it's a specific drive and buy you a couple of drives, which for Kansas City was the difference between them losing in the AFC Championship game a couple of years ago and them winning a Super Bowl, right? It's that the defense went from being an atrocity to being just good enough to win a few drives here and there. And when you have Mahomes in that offense, that's all you need. Buffalo, it's the same thing. Like their defense was just showing up at the key moment against Baltimore every single time. Like a third down, that's when Jerry Hughes would win a pass rush and get there. So I think both these defenses remind me a little bit of each other in that regard.
Don't forget too, Buffalo gave up 3 points last week. There was also like Tre'Davious got whooped on that one route. I mean, it's wide open. Tyler Huntley misses the throw. You can't have those types of breakdowns with Buffalo. Per PFF and PFF ELO, the NFL got it right. This game is number 1 versus number 2 in PFF ELO rankings, and then the Bucs Packers is 3 versus 4. Yeah. So the top 4 ranked teams are all remaining here. This is 1 versus 2. The Chiefs are 5th in offense. Bills are 6th. Bills are 8th in defense. Chiefs are 16th. So I've given the Chiefs the mental advantage defensively, but our numbers are saying the Bills have the defensive advantage. I also keep coming back to last year matters too in the history of Mahomes and the Chiefs, and I think that could be a factor. So 3-point spread here. Where you leaning, man?
I do think that Buffalo have a real chance in this one.
Pick them.
Huh?
Pick them.
I might. I like their ability to slow down Patrick Mahomes and that offense. I also potentially like their ability even more if Patrick Mahomes is injured and therefore not 100% himself. And then I don't think Josh Allen's going to play as badly as he did either last week or the last time they played. And if Josh Allen plays like the way he's played most of the season, that is one of the most difficult offenses in the league to stop. So, all right, let's pick the upset. Let's go Buffalo.
Man, you started to talk me into it with this Mahomes injury stuff. I don't pick against the Chiefs, though, as a matter of practice. It's just, I'm going to lean the Chiefs. Somebody's going to have their legend, multiplied by 1,000, though. It's either, battered Mahomes drags the Chiefs to victory. Josh Allen drags the Bills back to the Super Bowl.
Well, Josh Allen chasing a $500 million contract. That's what you get if you turn your franchise into a Super Bowl winner again.
He's made himself a lot of money this year,
yeah.
Josh Allen. The other side, Rodgers going for Super Bowl number 2, Brady going for legend status. There's so much on the line this weekend. I love it. It's going to be great. The top 4 teams in the NFL. Good job, NFL. But I'm picking the Chiefs. Usually
when you get to this stage, there's at least one, usually actually multiple teams where you're like nothing really good comes out of that team winning the Super Bowl. There's no story attached to it. It's just, all right, they won. But now you just went through them. Like every one of these teams, there's a really good story to come out of it if they win.
There's always a story, Sam.
Mahomes already becomes a legend. Like Rodgers magnifies his, gets the second ring, which beats Favre. eventually.
Yeah.
Brady becomes Michael Jordan plus, and who's the last one? Josh Allen drags the Buffalo Bills to their first ever one. 4 Super Bowls and all
Right.
4 of them losing. They get one with Josh Allen.
Yeah, and don't forget, all offseason we talked about the Chiefs and their dynasty and all that stuff. It doesn't mean things are easy. Like if the Chiefs work their way into the Super Bowl
hard to
here,
win them.
it's very difficult. And just going into this weekend, they're playing their top competitor. The team that has the best chance of knocking them off. So should be a great weekend. We're looking forward to it. So I'm picking Packers, Chiefs, and you're picking Packers, Bills.
Yep.
And it's probably going to be Brady winning it all.
Yeah, playoff Brady.
Playoff. I mean, that's the other. Like, if playoff Brady just shows up and puts together another legendary performance, there's so much on the line. I can't wait.
How many has he been to? Super Bowls? 9?
Brady's been to 9 Super Bowls.
So this would be 10. Nobody else has even been to the highest number of conference championship games anybody other than Brady has been to is 7.
Yes.
And he would be going to his 10th Super Bowl if he went.
Yeah, and he's played in 5 wildcard games.
It's pretty ridiculous.
Brady has been a starter. You take out 2008 when he got hurt. He's been a starter for 19 seasons in the NFL. This is be his 14th conference championship game and potentially his 10th Super Bowl in 19 years.
That's madness.
Yes. Anyway, let's get into some offseason stuff because there's more fans than just these 4 teams. It's going to be a great weekend of football, but I want to discuss this ESPN article because it's good, it's timely. The PFF free agent list is out there. Go check it out, pff.com. Sam and I and Brad Spielberger, our cap/contract expert that we've just added to the mix this last year. We've worked hard on our free agent list. We're going to continue to add to it in the coming weeks. So ESPN had this article on the most important decision for all 32 teams. So it's essentially a guy that's going to hit free agency that they just have to make a decision on. And I think it's a really good starting point, discussion point. So let's start with Dak Prescott as the decision that the Cowboys have to make. I had somebody ask me, why is Dak Prescott on your list of potential free agents? It's because
he's
as
a
of
free
now,
agent.
he's technically going to be a free agent, and the Dallas Cowboys have to make an official decision to sign Dak or let him walk.
Yeah, and I don't think there's a bigger decision to be made than the one on Dak Prescott. I think everyone assumes that it's a slam dunk. Obviously, you pay Dak, but they haven't so far, right? And the number has only been going up for the entire time they've been negotiating. From the point where they drew a line in the sand and said, this is our number, accept it or, come back with a counter, the contract or Dak's leverage has gone up and the number that he will be playing with has gone up. So if they haven't done it yet, it's not a slam dunk that they're going to do it, particularly having, him coming off an injury and all those other things. It isn't a slam dunk. They have to make this happen if they want it to happen. And I think there's a real argument that you don't need to, or you might be better off going in a different direction. And it's not because Dak Prescott isn't a great quarterback. He is, but it's because is he a transcendent quarterback that justifies the $40+ million a year you're going to have to pay him to keep him? Or have you just seen enough with like Andy Dalton? Have you seen enough from Andy Dalton to justify, hey, getting okay quarterback play with this group of receivers is actually kind of easy, right? And we're not saying we roll into 2021 with Dalton as your starter, but the point is, if I can get him to do that with a garbage offensive line with this group of really good receivers, it's not that hard to find a guy that can play 80% of Dak Prescott without having to spend much money at all.
See, I've changed my tune on Dak over the last year plus of watching him play. I always go back to, there was a point after his first 4 seasons where he had 2 top 10s and 2 times where he did rank 18th, 19th, 20th in PFF grades. Mm-hmm. And the stats were a little bit better than his performance would indicate. But I do think, he had his best year in 2019 and then continued that into 2020 before the injury. And I know it's with that great supporting cast, but I think what you're paying for here is the known versus the unknown. And I always use that top 8, top 10 quarterback cutoff. And I think with Phillip Rivers retiring and Breeze is gone and maybe Big Ben's gone soon, it's a new top 8, right? But Brady's 43. There's a new top 8 to 10. And there was a point where Dak felt like he was on the outside looking in. He was similar to Wentz. He was similar to Goff. Let's be serious here. Those guys have rotated through who's been the best quarterback since they all got drafted in 2016. But I think Dak is in that top 8 mix. So if you're going to get Phillip Rivers, Big Ben, Andrew Luck type of production year in, year out. I think Dak is that guy. And I would pay for that. I'd pay $40 million for that. I would pay for that, for the known. And I think that's what Dallas should do. And then you just say, okay, we have to do everything we can to keep the Amari Coopers and CeeDee Lambs and Michael Gallups around him as much as possible. And that's the way you maximize that investment.
But remember, the unknown isn't as scary as it used to be. Like, that was the thing, is that quarterbacks, part of this crazy quarterback money was driven by a bunch of contracts that were given out because the prospect of the unknown was so terrifying that you threw whatever amount of money was required to keep the guy you already had, right? The devil you knew was so valuable compared to the one you don't that you just had to throw a $100 million contract at Alex Smith or Joe Flacco or whoever it was, right? The unknown is no longer particularly scary because absolute worst case scenario, you decide late into training camp that, you know what, Jarrett Stidham sucks. We're going to have to go in another direction quickly. And Cam Newton's still sitting there on the street for a bargain basement contract. And you sign him up. Okay, he wasn't the answer anyway. But my point is, it's not that hard anymore to find a viable starting caliber quarterback.
But
you
the
keep
difference
talking
between
about all these
viable
guys.
and top 10 is significant.
It is. But so is the difference between top 10 and transcendent, which is the problem that Dallas face, right? The different, do you ever anticipate Dak Prescott reaching a level that Deshaun Watson was on this season?
No.
Okay, so that is your problem because he's going to require the same contract, and if not higher, right? Because he's signing it later. So that is Dallas's problem in a nutshell. They're going to have to pay an equivalent contract for something that definitely isn't the same level of play, and the difference between the two is an important one because it's the difference between you being able to elevate everybody around you. Okay, Deshaun Watson just went 4-12, so not elevate them that much, but it's the difference between being able to make everything else better and when the pieces start to fall apart around you, you're done. And that, I think, is significant for Dallas because do you pay a Deshaun Watson contract for a guy that's 85% of Deshaun Watson, or do you pay like a bag of peanuts for a guy that's 85% of Dak Prescott?
It's a fair point, but I think that the money that you save on Dak is going to be, I know it's locked up in Zeke. That's another issue.
That's your problem, yeah.
That's a big problem. But the money that you save on Dak gets you what? Starting linebacker, starting strong safety, starting maybe two other starters that you just need to be average. I still think that the opportunity cost that you miss out on between Dak and the next guy is significant enough. I'd still pay for the known because, look, we've discussed plenty of times here on this podcast, it's easy to find a starter. But maybe that's dwindling a little bit because do you want to roll in with, I love Jameis, but do I want to be tied to Jameis, right? Like I love him in theory as like top 32 quarterback in the world. Do I want to be the team that starts Jameis Winston? Do I want to be the team that starts Marcus Mariota or Cam Newton? Do I want to be the team that, Daniel Jones is a viable starter, but do I want to just, Daniel Jones is my guy for the next 4 or 5 years? Do I want to be tied to them? I feel much more comfortable being tied to Dak than any of those other guys, even if I have to pay a little bit more money for it.
Dallas's problem is that the decisions they're making now are irrevocably tied to mistakes they've made in the past, right? So the Zeke Elliott thing, if you hadn't already thrown a ton of money at Zeke Elliott, this would be easier. If you had just signed Dak Prescott to a big extension in the first place and not had this protracted negotiation, you would be better off because it would be cheaper and you'd already have it done, right? Now, neither of those things are true. So you've already thrown a ton of money at Zeke. That's gone. And you have to pay Dak Prescott more than you would have had to pay if you just locked him up early and got it done. So you're faced with a different set of circumstances and the price is higher. And that's what makes it a decision to me. If you're just asking in abstract terms, is Dak Prescott worth a big contract extension with no other information present? I would say yes. But in the current set of circumstances,
given the other mistakes,
I think there is a line at which Dallas should not go beyond financially. And if that line is already short of where the money needs to go, they have to walk away. They've already sort of set that precedent.
If Dak does hit the market, you've got other teams who haven't made the running back mistake.
Who can afford that.
The Bears and these other teams that are just going to go all out for Dak if he actually hits the open market. Okay, a couple other decisions that I think are huge. Let's look at two of the best receivers in the entire free agent class, Kenny Golladay and Allen Robinson. Allen Robinson, we've talked about so much about how he's never really played with a good quarterback, and now it's his chance. It's now his chance to shop around. Give me Aaron Rodgers, I'm coming to you. Whoever, Deshaun Watson, I'm coming to you, even though they don't have the money in Houston if he stays. Either way, Allen Robinson can go find a good quarterback to play with. And then Kenny Golladay in Detroit, the entire Lions receiving core is free agents, from Kenny Golladay to Marvin Jones to Danny Amendola. It feels like they at least need to try to lock Golladay up, not let him hit the market. Whereas I think the Bears, they might just be past their time with Allen Robinson.
With Detroit, I think it comes down to what they are going to do with Matthew Stafford. So Dan Campbell signs as head coach, 6-year deal, which, by the way, is like the life jackpot, right? Nobody has any idea if Dan Campbell's a good head coach, but he's got guaranteed money for 6 years. Yeah. He could be a disaster, get fired after 12 months, and be laughing to the bank for the next 5 years, just feet up, chilling on the beach.
But
really
he's a competitor. He doesn't want to do that.
Really is goals. Anyway, if my point with that is 6-year deal suggests they think that this is a project. This is not a quick fix. This is a potential rebuild, tear down, have some time committed to this. At which point, that gives you the flexibility to say, you know what, Matthew Stafford's time here might be coming to an end. We're going to go in a different direction at quarterback. We're going to find a new guy and rebuild this thing from the ground up. I think if you're keeping Stafford, Kenny Golladay is an absolute must, because that offense is crippled when he's not there. Like, it's huge. If you're going in a different direction, you've got time to find the quarterback and then build a receiving group around him.
The tricky part, though, and my friend Mike Tannenbaum uses this phrase, and I hope I don't completely ruin it. This phrase that Parcells used to say, Bill Parcells, you have to win now. Like, when you take over a team, you have to win now so you can win tomorrow. And it is that hybrid approach of, like, remember Parcells' teams historically, they would make a quick turnaround. Mm-hmm. And it's because he would get veterans in there. And even if they're not part of the 6-year plan, they're part of the 2-year plan. And it's almost like you need to get that vote of confidence. You need to get the organization moving in the right way to win now, so that, yes, 3, 4, 5 years from now, okay, now you can make your run at a title, right? So I think there's this element of, you can't just let everybody walk. You have no receivers. You don't want to go into next year with absolutely nobody to throw to. I don't think you want to just move on from Matthew Stafford immediately. So I think there's going to be some transitional time, and Stafford plus Golladay seem like they should be a part of that. So I would bring Golladay back, because he could be a part of the win tomorrow and win 4 years from now as well. I think with Allen Robinson, though, the Bears should try to keep him. I just think I think he's checked out of Chicago.
Oh, he definitely wants out. But, like, they could franchise him, right? Like,
yeah.
They can keep him if they want to.
Piss him off even more.
Yeah.
By the way, I think the Bears are making, based off the press conferences and where Nagy is and just the whole thing, I think they're trying to make a big move at quarterback. They're going to be calling around trying to make
what
a
is it?
huge.
Predict one. Call it out now. What are the Bears doing at quarterback? What's their splash play?
I mean, if Dak hit the open market, they're going all in there. I think they might call the Raiders for a Derek Carr.
That's your splash play at quarterback, Derek Carr.
Have you seen the Chicago Bears quarterbacks for the last 30 years?
Yes.
That's a massive splash in Chicago, yes.
But the point is not to make a splash relative to the ineptitude you've had.
It is a little bit. It is
to make a splash overall.
No, hey, Derek Carr was a top 10 quarterback last year. He's got 2 top 10 finishes in PFF grades in his history, and 1 borderline. It's like getting back to the glory days of Eric Kramer in the mid-90s.
God.
That's a splash play for the Bears.
Okay.
When you go from Trubisky and Foles to a Derek Carr, it absolutely is. But that's the type of thing I think they're going to be looking at. Let me think of what else. Gardner Minshew. No. Let's go to some other decisions. Right here down the street, Carl Lawson, Cincinnati Bengals. He's hitting the open market, as is William Jackson III. Both of those guys are 2 guys came in right around the same time, and 2 of the better players on a bad Bengals team here. It feels like they got to at least keep one of them. And Lawson's one of those guys. He's only got like 23, 24 career sacks. He's the best pass rusher on the market by our grades over the last few years. And on the open market, sacks get overpaid for every single year. Bud Dupree's going to get overpaid by for sack totals, and a few other guys are too. Carl Lawson could be the steal of free agency, and that's why I think the Bengals should do what they can to keep him.
I am inclined to agree. I also think that you could just deploy this guy as a genuine situational pass rusher. Just tell him, forget the run. I don't care. Don't care at all. Make him into Yannick Ngakoue, right?
Yeah.
Do not care if you defend the run whatsoever. Just go after the passer. And I think he might be a better pass rusher than Yannick Ngakoue if that's all you ask him to do. But it's almost like they treat him a little bit like New England does with, what's the guy's name?
Dietrich Wise?
Yeah, there you go. Dietrich Wise, who is so bad as a run defender, you can't do that in Bill Belichick's system, so you just get marginalized and never play. But the Bengals feel like they do that with Carl Lawson a little bit as well. It's like, but you don't even run what Belichick does, and B, you can't really be that picky. Beggars can't be choosers, and right now you've got a little pot out begging for coins, right? You actually have a guy that can do some damage. Unleash him, let him go.
Yeah, I would try to hold on to him if I'm the Bengals. Another big name is Justin Simmons, one of the best safeties in the NFL over the last couple of years for the Broncos. Let's talk two safeties, Justin Simmons and Marcus May. They're part of our top 5 safeties hitting free agency. You've got Marcus Williams from the Saints, John Johnson from the Rams, and Anthony Harris from the Vikings. They're all different styles, but Marcus May for the Jets, Justin Simmons with the Broncos. They franchised Simmons last year. I think they definitely want to bring him back too, especially in Fangio's system, with how much they rely on good safety play. Simmons has been just fantastic the last couple of years.
Yeah, I think he has. He's really good in that role. He's really good. He's more active than a free safety has any right to be. I think he should absolutely be extended long term. The Marcus May one is more interesting, though, because the Jets are still in this rebuild mode. Marcus May obviously is a really talented player, but you shipped off Jamal Adams, which I think was the right move for a
first rounder. Yeah,
2, right? They got 2 first rounders for him. Or did I make that up? What did they get? Anyway,
don't put me on the spot.
Sorry, they got more than enough back for Jamal Adams to make it a worthwhile deal, right?
2 first rounders.
Yeah. See, I knew. Even though he's a talented playmaker,
Seahawks.
Right?
It just looks worse and worse.
Even though he's a talented playmaker, it makes sense to ship a guy like that off for 2 first-round picks. But because you've already done that, and you have Marcus May now stepped into that role, did a good job, you're essentially left with the same question, albeit without the draft capital involved. He's a safety. Is a safety ever impactful enough for you to pay the giant amount of money to, particularly when you're not one safety piece away from a Super Bowl, right? You're in the middle of a rebuild. Is it worth committing a monster contract to Marcus May, or should you just say, thanks for the time, good luck in the future?
You're not a safety away. However, Marcus May was one of the reasons why the Jamal Adams trade could happen, right? Because the Jets, when we do our team needs pieces here, Jets, what do you need? O-line, receivers, but mostly receivers and corners, right? The receivers and corners, you got to be able to cover. If you take another piece out of that secondary, it just, okay, now you need a safety.
It certainly isn't helping.
It adds to the need list. Yeah. And I think, win now so you can win tomorrow theory, at least keep some good players. And I think May is one of them. And again, I think he's done it in multiple roles. He's played Jamal Adams' role. He's played straight up free safety. He's done it all. And in, Robert Saleh's defense there, honestly, he could play either the true single high free safety role or more of the box safety in their cover 3 heavy attack. So I would lean toward keeping May as much as I could if I'm the Jets, because they need at least some defensive pieces.
Yeah, I think the only problem is that it's going to cost a lot of money to do it. It's not,
I get it.
Abstract terms, yeah, absolutely. Keep a guy like Marcus May. He's a really good player, and if you ship him off, you've got to replace him. But if you're in this rebuild world of trying to allocate, when you're rebuilding, one of the things you have to deal with that some other teams don't really is you have a sort of fresh attack at how to construct a roster from the ground up, and therefore where the resources should go. And all of the data essentially would say the resources shouldn't go to a safety. So even if you're in a situation now where he's one of your best players, that's not the situation you want to be in. So you shouldn't head down that road with the contract.
But in a Saleh defense, which it's not just, hey, we play cover 3 every single time, but it's still a big part of their defense where you got to have the true free and a true strong. all of those defenses have excelled when they have, as we talked to Dan Quinn the other day, those prototypes. By the way, if you're a Cowboys fan, listen to the Dan Quinn interview from Monday. I think he's very insightful for your new defensive coordinator. They do need safeties, in that defense. By the way, as a strategy, drafting a Jamal Adams, getting a couple years of play out of him, and then flipping him for 2 first-rounders, getting a Khalil Mack, getting a few years out of him and flipping him for multiple first-rounders, I would do that every single time. I would trade all of my non-quarterback stars for 2 or 3 first-rounders every time because their impact...
Wouldn't trade them all, but I'd trade a lot of them.
I'd trade a lot of them. Almost all of the non-quarterback stars. Maybe not receivers and corners, but the people, the players that the rest of the league maybe values more than they should in relation to wins.
Yeah.
I would.
But that's a hard thing to quantify. Them. My thing would be there's a certain degree of superstar that I would just never trade away because it's too hard to replace those guys. And the draft is still such a crapshoot that you can easily lose out even though you won the trade on paper, right? The problem is, can you correctly draw the line between those guys and the guys that look like that for a brief period of time but aren't really?
Just so look really quick. This might be a daily topic as well. Khalil Mack and Jamal Adams trade. At the time, you look at it like, wow, Bears, you just got Khalil Mack. This is great. But we also saw them peak with a really nice 2018 season, and Khalil Mack can only help you so much. Jamal Adams trade, for what Seattle did this offseason, it was like, wow, they've actually got good corners now. You add Jamal Adams to the mix. The offense is cooking because Russ is cooking. And now it's like, well, Seattle fell short. They lost in the wild card round. All right, where are the holes on the roster? Uh-oh, we don't have a first-rounder this year. Uh-oh, we don't have a first-rounder next year. Mm-hmm. And that's what the Bears have been dealing with. They had a great 2018 season, and then they don't have a first-round pick for 2 straight years to actually improve their team.
The Bears...
It's like the same story. It's great emotionally at first, and then before you know it, it's like, whoa, how are we going to actually get better?
The Khalil Mack trade is the rare lose-lose trade. Sometimes you get a win-win. Both teams won. They made out of it well. I think the Bears and the Raiders both lost. Chicago got Khalil Mack and traded away a bunch of stuff, and it hasn't done them any good. And the Raiders won the trade on paper, got a ton back,
drafted
poorly,
and
have turned it into nothing.
Yeah.
Like, neither team made out well from that trade. I think the Jets absolutely won the Jamal Adams trade. They got 2 first-round picks for a guy who, as good as he is a safety and can't make that big of an impact on your wins. So that's 100% on board with that. I'm just saying that there's no trade you could give me to make me trade away a Randy Moss.
I agree with that.
I would never trade. I don't think I would ever trade away an Aaron Donald. I don't think you can throw enough at me for me to be interested in trading away an Aaron Donald.
No, transcendent players.
Yes.
Or high value receivers and corners.
But my point is, can you correctly identify a transcendent player versus a player that looks like it for a while and isn't?
Yeah, like I said, the Panthers should have traded Christian McCaffrey when his value was crazy high after year 2. And what does that look like right now? Yeah, no kidding. They should have. All right, one more guy to talk about. Trent Williams, San Francisco 49ers. What a fascinating career Trent Williams has had. He just finished the season as our top-graded offensive tackle for the 3rd time in history.
Having not really played for a while.
Yeah, after not playing for a long time.
And by the way, add him to the mental tally of guys that took some time away from the game, came back, like the sabbatical.
You've been talking about this for a while, right? Guys that take time. It seems like offensive, like Richie Incognito.
Just make sure I remember, because the next time that comes up, I'll forget Trent Williams did it.
Richie Incognito, Trent Williams, Marshawn Lynch did it, but he didn't look good coming back.
No.
Yeah, some guys did, though. Anyway, Trent Williams has been our top-graded offensive tackle in 2013, 2016, and now 2020. So grab him in 4 years, and he'll be the best tackle in the NFL. But it's a big decision. I thought the Niners did great to pick him up this offseason for a couple mid-round picks. But now they have a decision to make as far as bringing him back.
You don't often replace one of the greatest players in your franchise's history, Joe Staley, a guy who he's probably not a Hall of Famer, but Ring of Honor, right? 49ers Ring of Honor player, Joe Staley, that kind of caliber career. You don't replace a guy like that and easily. It's usually a problem. It usually becomes an issue the next year. The 49ers not only replaced him, not only didn't skip a beat, but actually upgraded at the position by having the year that Trent Williams just had. It's nuts.
Really incredible.
And Like, he was good in pass protection, really good in pass protection, but run blocking, he was like stealing people's souls all season long. And this is an offense that likes to do that. He's well suited for this offense, as well as just being an important piece of the puzzle. I know he's getting on in years, but I would really be trying to bring him back if I'm the 49ers.
He's 32 years old. He'll be 32, at the start of next season, or 33 at the start of next season. We have seen tackles age well. I think if you can get him on a 3-year deal, I know Anthony Costanzo just retired, and if a guy does hit the wall and retire for whatever reason, it does put you in a massive hole. But I would do what I could if I'm the Niners to lock him up.
I mean, Whitworth is 38 and still going strong. Jason Peters played well up until 38 and then hit an injury wall. I would say the concern with Williams is that he has dealt with a series of niggling injuries for a while. Like, he's been banged up for a long time. So if it is a case of the older you get as an offensive lineman, the more the cumulative weight of injuries just starts to grind on you, then yeah, maybe he will hit a wall pretty quickly and fall off. But if it's a case of those guys just go on forever these days into their late 30s, and you got like 5 more years of elite play out of Trent.
And Mike McGlinchey.
Yes.
2 guys in their late 30s.
1 or 2 for Mike.
The argument against Trent Williams, though, a lot of tackles going to be drafted in the first couple rounds next year. Sure. Shanahan's system has done a really good job of developing tackles, putting them in position to succeed, and when they find their type of zone blocking tackle, they usually do have success in that system. But definitely a decision for the Niners to make. So as always, a lot of free agent discussion. If you're wondering about our Phillip Rivers take, he did retire. Is he a Hall of Famer? It's all part of the PFF Daily. If you're loving our podcast here, you're going to love the Daily just as much. So go check it out wherever you're listening to this podcast. Search PFF NFL Daily. Subscribe, listen. We appreciate everybody that's already moved over there. It's not millions and millions yet, but it's like hundreds of thousands that are listening. So we appreciate that. It's not really that much, guys. I'm just kidding. But we appreciate the support. So that'll do it for us today. Championship weekend. Everybody enjoy the football this weekend. We'll be back Monday reviewing all the games and a lot more free agency, offseason talk. Actually, on Monday, I got a mock draft coming out.
Oh, yeah?
PFF.com. So you can dissect my mock draft. We'll get into some draft discussion.
Worst mock ever.
Senior Bowl practice is next week. The Senior Bowl game is a week from this Saturday. All sorts of off-season fun picking it up as we go here. So enjoy the football. We'll see you guys on Monday.